Good morning. We are on chapter 10 of Revelation. I'm going to skip the review this time. We know, am I going to skip it? John's told, there's the epistles, then he's taken up to heaven in a vision, and then we see the seals, and then the last seal is the seven trumpets, or the seven trumps of the angels. There's a lot of sevens involved there. The epistles tell church history, as well as other things. It's directly to those churches, but it's also a historical context. And then when we get to the angels, the last thing they've done, the sixth angel has sounded, and this cloud of nastiness in the form of these supernatural scorpions of some variety, which could be technological or metaphysical. I lean toward the metaphysical, but I can see them being some application of mRNA drone technology forced on the people, but I think it's probably something metaphysical. They come out of nowhere, and the four angels that were loosed prepare for an hour, a day, and a month, and a year, which tells me that there's a very specific, it's probably going to take place in an hour. Chapter 10. And I saw another mighty angel come down from heaven, clothed with a cloud, and a rainbow upon his head, and his face as it were the sun, and his feet as pillars of fire. And he had in his hand a little book open, and he set his right foot upon the sea, and left on the earth, and cried with a loud voice as a lion roars, and when he had cried, seven thunders uttered their voices. There's the other seven. There's the other seven. So there's 6 sevens up to this point. So you got the 7 stars, the 7 candlesticks, the menorah, which are the 7 churches, the 7 spirits of God, the 7 eyes on the Lamb, the 7 seals, the 7 trumpets and angels, and the 7 thunders. And verse 4, and when the 7 thunders had uttered their voices, I was about to write. And I heard a voice from heaven saying unto me, seal up those things which the 7 thunders uttered, and write them not. I wonder very much if there's going to be an additional biblical book or catalog of books in the millennial reign, and those 7 thunders will finally be understood, or if that's something we have to wait until eternity for. But that's interesting that John was given information which God didn't want the rest of us to have at this time. So there's something in there. Here's something to think about. The devil knows he's cooked. He knows he's cooked. But he doesn't know exactly how it's going to happen. God's outside of time and space. Devil and his angels, these fallen ones, the computer virus is still inside the computer. It's inside time and space. It can't get out of that time frame unless God allows it, which he does periodically, apparently, because we see in Job, the sons of God are gathered before God, and he goes to talk to them. And by sons of God, euphemistically, we're talking about fallen ones, the Nephilim, the angels that rebelled. And we know that specifically because the devil's there, and he says he's going to and fro in the earth. That's another, not on the earth, in the earth. Now, that could be semantic, so I don't build a big case around that. But Jesus and Revelation and Job hearken to something going on inside our earth, not just on top of it. I don't know what that is. There's something about that. However, the bad forces in the world don't know when God's going to do what he's going to do, as the apocalyptos we call Revelation says. They don't know. I think it boils down to we're living in a world where there are cycles, like seasons, like a pendulum swinging. Because I think what happens in Revelation is a result of a sort of ripening, and the demons don't know when that is. So they've always got to have their man ready in the wings. They've always got to have a figure that could be the Antichrist in the wings. I don't think it's... in the end of days, it'll be one figure. It just... Anti is against Christ, in terms of denying his deity and godhood, but also the ideology and practices of Christianity. In history, there's always been these figures at the top of power who would fit into the mold of an Antichrist. The Russians, I learned this from Tolstoy's War and Peace. The Russians thought that Napoleon was the Antichrist. And the name Napoleon actually derives from Niflheim, which, and he was Italian, he wasn't even French. He was on this island, I can't remember if it was Corsica, I think it was Corsica. And his name actually derives ultimately from a German word, Nephilim, which etymologically and culturally speaking could harken back to the Nephilim. And really what's interesting to me about Napoleon is he might have actually been a good emperor until it got to his head. Specifically, Josephine wouldn't give him an heir. And when he couldn't get an heir through Josephine, he banged another chick to get an heir. And the heir didn't really, I think the kid lived to 20. Napoleon II lived to 20 or something and then died. So I think Napoleon had God's hand on him until he did that. And then they're saying during the Battle of Waterloo the guy was drunk. Point being, there are powers in the world that rise and fall. And it says in Proverbs, as God turns the waters, he turns a king's heart, basically. The people at nodes of power in the world are directed by God specifically. Now, the demonic forces in the world want a part of that. So they're going to influence, and they're going to send bad ideas and setbacks and other things. It's like, it'd be like if you're 7 years old and you're told you get a big prize if you do something. So you clean the dishes, and then you're distracted and not cleaning the dishes. You play around in your room. Oh, you don't get the big prize. So in this context, the big prize is salvation, or perhaps it's a position God's designed for you. Playing in your room are the distractions of this world. And what the devil's going to do is try and put little things in front of you that make it seem like this goal is insurmountable. You forget about it. Anyway, I'm trying to say this. They don't know when God's going to pull everybody out of the pool like old Bill Cosby was out of the pool. That's not known. It's going to happen. They don't know when. See, the devil didn't know Jesus was going to let himself die and rise again, even though the scriptures predict it in the Old Testament, because they do it in an oblique way. And that's what Revelation's doing here. Those seven thunders have a spiritual, tactical importance, I expect, which is why they can't be said here. Because if they were, I think they would give away certain things to the computer virus enemy we call the devil, toward Clippy the Paperclip, who has a bad attitude. That's really all Satan is. He's just Clippy the Paperclip with a bad attitude. That's what he really is. The designer made the computer. The computer's operating system got a virus, the sin virus, selfish sort of arrogant pride thing. And Clippy the Paperclip was perfect until he started being a jerk. Now God's in there trying to write a Word document, and Clippy's like, would you like to use the word obfuscated for strange? And God's, no, Clippy, get out of here. And he wants to fix the computer, but if he wipes it, he loses all the other data. So God engineers a way to go into his simulation through Christ, reprogram it from the inside out. And now those who accept the salvation antivirus are not going to be screwed over by Clippy the Paperclip and his minions. That's a trite little tongue-in-cheek way of describing something that's bigger than all of us, but in a way that's what we're seeing. So, verse 5. So basically the point of that is the devil and his angels don't know what's coming. So they've always got to be ready. They've got a good idea. They've got a better idea than we do, probably, because they know some of the inside baseball we don't. But they don't know for sure, because they're not read in. Now, the angels of God are read in, and some prophets and saints are read in, but when we're read in, we're given it in a prophetic sort of language that's imparsible, not impossible. It can't be parsed until the event's already passed, and then everybody's like, oh, that was obvious. But you don't even know it when you're in it, I don't think. I think Jesus knew more, but even God, who was Christ, said, of that day no man knoweth, not even the Son, only the Father. And there's a thing in our ephemeral world where if you're inside the simulation, there's only so much of its run you can see, even if you designed it. That's sort of what's going on there. Sort of. Metaphor stuff. Verse 5. And the angel which I saw stand upon the sea and upon the earth lifted up his hand to heaven, and swear by him that lives forever and ever, who created heaven, and the things that therein are, and the earth, and the things that therein are, and the sea, and the things which are therein, that there should be time no longer. See what I've been saying about time? Now, does this happen after the millennial reign, or in the midst of it? Let's see. I don't know. There's a division between the people who wouldn't repent. There's going to be people who survive the apocalypse and still don't repent. And this spot right here. So I don't know that if it's a chapter division or if there's a big time division there. Verse 7. Let's hear what it says. But in the days of the voice of the seventh angel, when he shall begin to sound, the mystery of God should be finished as he has declared to his servants, the prophets. So that, I think that means it's going to be the end of the millennial reign. Because I don't think the full mystery of God is revealed until the end of that millennium. I think what has to happen in this world we live in, see, the mystery of God, what is that? Well, why are we here? Why do we struggle? You know, everybody has this idea that God and the devil are fighting a contest and playing chess, but they're not. That's dualism. And C.S. Lewis said next to Christianity, dualism is the most manly perspective on this spiritual battle we find ourselves in every day. But it's not true. Because the devil is just Clippy the Paperclip, and Steve Jobs, or let's call it, I don't even like Steve Jobs or Bill Gates because they did a bunch of demonic psychedelic stuff and then they got onto their computer. Let's just say it's not Steve Gates or Bill Gates fighting with Clippy the Paperclip, okay? That would put Bill Gates on the same level as Clippy, and even though I don't like him as a person, in terms of metaphor, the designer is above that which has been designed. Dualism puts them at equal loggerheads. That's just not the case. I think what we're dealing with here, mankind, human beings, you and me, over time we are, well, I'm just an old chunk of coal, but I'll be a diamond someday. You compress that coal and it becomes a diamond with pressure and difficulty and time. Pressure, challenges, time. We are supposed to be eternal. We're not here for this world. Now, that doesn't mean this world has no stakes. It doesn't mean we don't strive for things. That doesn't mean we don't fight the good fight as Paul did. That doesn't mean we're a bunch of effeminate, ooh, Jesus loves you, fags. It doesn't mean we're that. You can say fag, you should, and here's why. You don't call a dope fiend an opium connoisseur, okay? You don't call a sodomite an anal connoisseur or a homosexual. The Bible calls them a sodomite. And if they're offended by that, that's their problem. It's the same with anything. Now, you don't hate people, but part of what's happened in the 20th and 21st century is propaganda and psyops have taught us not to call things as they are. When you don't call things as they are, you put a morass, M-O-R-A-S-S, of mental static between you and the truth. That's what Newspeak of 1984 is. That's what all that's about. That's what political correctness is. It's a form of Newspeak to obfuscate meaning and thereby shroud truth and the ability to overcome deception. Christians are supposed to have the authority and power of God, the designer of everything. They're not supposed to sit on their laurels and be a bunch of little Nancy boys who are afraid to confront someone or bring up their Christianity in public. Now, there's decorum and there's a time and place for everything. You don't just run around bitch slapping people with Jesus, pardon my French. However, you also don't avoid that when the situation calls for it. And that's easier said than done. It's easier said than done. So, what am I saying here? The mystery of God is to make us into the eternal diamonds we're supposed to be. That means we will go through difficulty. But the diamond is tougher than the coal it comes from. The plant shoots out of the soil. You have the seed planted usually in some sort of excreta, some sort of poop, fertilizer. And it draws from that nasty, putrefied, digested crap nutrients and becomes fruitful. It turns from crap. It pulls crap out, reprocesses it, uses it, and produces fruit. But if you don't plant it in fertilizer, good fertilizer, it can't get those nutrients. So sometimes, to get the most healthy plant, you have to have the seeds covered in bat guano. That's bat crap. Or bird guano. That's bird crap. Same thing. Guano. You've got to cover it in that. It's really good for it. But in the time, imagine being a conscious seed and you're covered in crap. It sucks. But then you're going to become this plant. We are in the seed phase in life. We are covered in crap. that's giving us the nutrients we need to sprout into eternity. The difficulties we go through now are weight training for an existence that looks at those difficulties as so minor compared to what's ahead that they're basically forgotten. It's like when you were a child and you were learning to walk. You're an adult now. You don't have any trouble walking. When you were a child, you banged your face on the floor a dozen times a day for months until you figured it out. We're banging our face on the floor so that in the eternal way, we can occupy the destiny God's designed for us. So I think the mystery of God for all mankind is that think of mankind as a tree, and think of eternity as when the tree fruits, it puts forth its fruit and there's a harvest. And we've been pushing our way up through the guano of an ephemeral world that has sin and death in it, so that we will be a more perfect eternal creation when the time comes. That doesn't mean we just allow ourselves to be walked over. It also doesn't mean we demand people respect the eternal destiny we have, because every man has to come to God through fear and trembling on his own. So there's a balance and discretion here. When you're a kid, black and white's easy. The world's always black and white. But as you become an adult, you realize you can't exactly tell what is and isn't black and white without God. That's one of the reasons we need God. That's one of the reasons people cast lots. Both alternatives seemed right. Which one is the right one? All right, God, we cast lots. It's this one, not this one. I'll pray over a coin and flip it for that reason. But there are no shades of gray. There is only black and white. The thing of it is, determining what is and isn't black and white requires a perspective outside of time, which God has. But when the mystery of God is complete, what was it he said? There should be time no longer. So there comes a time when time's done. This variable in the creation God has made is taken out. Entropy stops. God made time. He's not bound by time. Ergo, the good versus evil reality we see is not dualistic. It's a situation of master and rebel. It's not a situation of brother and brother at equal loggerheads. That's false. That's what many people are taught Christianity is. They're taught that the devil and God are playing this big contest with one another to see which way mankind goes. It's nothing like that. That is total nonsense and fantasy that has no bearing whatsoever with Scripture. The idea that God and the devil are in a contest over mankind, no. It's never happened, never will. The devil, the fallen angel Lucifer, the rebellious one, is a subroutine in a simulation that has a virus and is trying to infect the rest of the simulation. God put in an antivirus of Christ, and God, being God, can use the wickedness of that computer virus to further develop mankind, just like a good gardener can use particularly smelly fertilizer to make some beautiful trees grow. That's the mystery, I think. I may be wrong. I'm not God, obviously. At least that's part of it. Now, but in the days of the voice of the seventh angel, when he shall begin to sound, the mystery of God should be finished, as he has declared to his servants the prophets. So in the days plural, that means time hasn't ended yet. It's coming to this, and it's known while the angel's on those shores. So there may be a long time this is happening before time is ended. I really do think this is at the end of the millennial reign, but we'll see if I'm wrong. Verse 8, And the voice which I heard from heaven spake unto me again, and said, Go take the little book which is open in the hand of the angel which stands upon the sea and upon the earth. And I went unto the angel and said unto me, Give me the little book. And he said unto me, Take and eat it up, and it shall make your belly bitter, but it shall be in your mouth sweet as honey. Number one, John didn't know he was about to get a snack. He thought he was getting the book. He got a snack. Woo! Number two, Isaiah had to do the same thing. He had to eat a book that tasted sweet but made his belly bitter. That's something we all have to face if we're going to follow Christ. The word and the truth is sweet. What's bitter is facing a world that doesn't know that or is directly opposed to that. And that makes you feel sick. That's scary. Because you have to go out there, you have to put yourself out there, and you have to risk everything. Because the days are a passing train, we're pilgrims and riding away. This isn't our be-all and end-all. There are eternal consequences. We are made into what we're going to be here. We have to act. But there's nothing we can keep here because there's a mortal coil we have to shuck, as Shakespeare said, into the eternal. Whether we're raptured at the end of the 70th week of Daniel, or in the midst of it, or before it, or at the end of the millennial reign, whether we're not raptured and die, and then we have to go into the eternal okaterion, that's the Greek word for body. We get a new body in eternity, you see. Whatever the case, we have to do things here, and even though it's not the be-all and end-all, it's going to feel that way. That's bitter. That scrolls of truth and understanding and knowledge is delicious. It's sweet. It's honey. But it's bitter down here when you realize what it means. And who knows? John probably actually had to eat something. Who knows? Because the way God works. Verse 10. And I took the little book out of the angel's hand and ate it up. And it was in my mouth sweet as honey. And as soon as I had eaten it, my belly was bitter. And he said unto me, You must prophesy again before many peoples and nations and tongues and kings. You, specifically John. But in a wider sense, John is euphemistic of all Christendom, of all people who follow Christ. It's not everybody has tongues or prophecy or preaching or teaching or healing. These are different gifts. Prophecy is to be sought, which tells me that there's a sort of hierarchical nature to the gifts, but I don't know for sure. I think some people are just born prophets, and some people become them, and some people never do. However, John's trek here is something those of us who follow Christ seriously, whether or not we always do a good job, are going to have to contend with. It's a bitter word in our belly, but it's sweet on the lips. Now, chapter 11 is a measurement chapter, and then chapter 12 goes back to the earth, and it concerns Babylon the Great and leads into chapter 13, the beast. The woman rides the beast in chapter 12. In chapter 11, there's olive trees, and there's candlesticks, and this is where we have the two witnesses. So I think what's happening here is up through chapter 10, we see the heavenly perspective, and I do think there's good indication that this angel standing on the earth and the land and declaring time no more, who has a book for John, I do think this is the end of the millennial reign here. But I may be wrong. We'll see when I come back tomorrow. Now, I got stuff to do, otherwise I'd talk more. God bless you all. Have a good Sunday.